Imagine this. You wake up to a message. Just one. No floods of notifications, no needy texts, no pings demanding attention. The silence is thick, almost uncomfortable. For the first time in weeks, no one is asking for your help. No one is expecting a reply. No one seems to need you. At first, it feels like a relief. But then, a chill creeps in. Where did everyone go? The people you always said yes to gone. The ones you dropped everything for silent. The constant flow of calls, crises, and emotional emergencies vanished. And slowly, a terrifying question whispers in the back of your mind. Was my worth only in my availability? You try to dismiss it, tell yourself everyone's just busy, that you finally got space to breathe. But the question lingers. Was it love, or convenience, connection, or consumption? Now imagine the same scene, but rewind a few months. Back when you were always there. You replied within minutes. You dropped plans to console others. You played therapist, secretary, emotional punch and beguile without ever being asked if you were okay. You prided yourself on being reliable, good, generous. But what if those weren't virtues, but sedatives? What if they were distractions from the truth that somewhere deep down you were terrified of what would happen if you weren't available? You never stopped to ask, why am I so afraid to say no? What does it cost to always say yes? Now consider this. Every time you say yes when you want to say no, a part of you dies quietly. Your boundaries erode. Your sense of self fades. And eventually, no one sees you anymore. They only see what you provide. Carl Jung once said, when you stop being available, everything changes. But he didn't mean that things just slow down. He meant that the structure of your reality shifts. People drop off. Situations reveal themselves. The masks fall. And more importantly, you meet someone you've long abandoned, yourself. But here's the paradox. You've spent so long giving because it made you feel valuable. But the more you gave, the more invisible you became. The more present you were for others, the more absent you became to yourself. You became a ghost in your own life. Always present, rarely seen. Always doing, never being. Ask yourself this. What happens when your identity is built on service, but no one serves you? What happens when your presence is expected, but never cherished? Have you confused being useful with being loved? Perhaps this is the true crisis, not that others take you for granted, but that you let them. Not because you're weak, but because somewhere along the way you learned that love was earned through sacrifice. What if that was a lie? What if every time you sacrificed your truth to keep the peace, you declared war on yourself? What if every time you put someone's needs above your own, you taught them to believe yours didn't matter? And now, finally, you've stopped. You've pulled back. You've said, I need space. And everything changes. But not in the way you imagined. Not with applause or understanding. It changes with silence, distance, confusion, loss. Because you're no longer useful in the way people depended on. And that, perhaps, is when the real reckoning begins. You begin to ask, who am I without the role I've played? Do I exist beyond what I offer? Can I be loved without being needed? These are not small questions. They are the questions. Because in the stillness that follows withdrawal, truths emerge. Some liberating, some devastating, but all essential. And so we begin not with answers, but with this. When you stop being available, you don't just change your schedule. You change your soul's alignment. Everything changes because you begin to change. And the world isn't ready for that. There's a peculiar tragedy in human life. You spend years becoming what others want: helpful, pleasant, present, available. Not because anyone forced you, but because somewhere in your upbringing, you internalize a silent rule. To be loved, you must be needed. You carry this rule like a sacred commandment, and with it, a deep, unspoken fear. If I stop being available, I will become invisible. But where did this belief come from? To understand it, We must begin not with behavior, but with psyche. Because the human need to be needed is rarely about altruism. It is more often than not a defense mechanism, a shield, a substitute for a deeper wound, the belief that you are not inherently worthy of love. Carl Jung called it the personatha mask we wear to survive the expectations of others. Not in a manipulative way, but in the most fragile, desperate sense. The persona is who you think you need to be in order to be safe in the world. It's why a child who grows up with emotionally unavailable parents becomes the responsible one. It's why someone neglected in their early years becomes the fixer, the rescuer, the reliable friend. It's why people pleasers are often the most emotionally bruised, because saying yes is their only known method for avoiding abandonment. But behind that mask lives the shadow. Jung described the shadow self as everything you repress in order to be accepted, your anger, your grief, your selfish desires, your unmet needs. The shadow isn't evil, it's exiled. You locked it away because at some point, expressing it got you punished, rejected, or ignored. And the longer it stays in the dark, the more it whispers, you are only good when you disappear for others. It's not just Jung who spoke of this. Nietzsche warned that he who despises himself still respects himself as one who despises. In other words, even when you hurt yourself by overgiving, by ignoring your limits, by making yourself endlessly available, you do it to preserve a sense of self. You respect yourself through your own sacrifice. Because sacrifice makes you feel noble, needed, righteous. But what if that nobility is a cage? Arthur Schopenhauer believed that much of human suffering came not from the world itself, but from our insatiable willer, endless striving to be recognized, validated, affirmed. When you are always available, always giving, always proving your worth, it's not selflessness, it's striving, desperate striving. The will to exist through usefulness. This is why saying no feels like death. Because for someone who's only ever been loved for their availability, withdrawal feels like erasure. You're not just turning down a favor, you're threatening your entire identity. Society doesn't help. From childhood, you're rewarded for being agreeable, compliant, helpful. The quiet student gets praised. The polite child gets more affection. The employee who goes the extra mile gets a promotion even if they collapse internally. The caretaker is venerated, while the boundary setter is labeled difficult. So you learn the rule: being available equals being good. And then you meet adulthood where the demands multiply. Your boss wants just one more thing. Your partner needs emotional support. Your friends expect you to pick up the pieces. Your family leans on you again and again. And because you've built your self-worth on being available, you say yes again and again until you disappear. Aldous Huxley wrote that the more powerful and original a mind, the more it will incline towards the religion of solitude, not isolation, but inner sovereignty. But for those trapped in the religion of availability, solitude feels like punishment. Stillness feels like failure. Because you've been programmed to equate your existence with your output, even Viktor Frankl, who survived the concentration camps, observed that when a person can't find a deep sense of meaning, they distract themselves with pleasure. In this case, pleasure isn't always indulgence, it's busyness, overcommitment, people-pleasing, service, anything to avoid being alone with the terrifying possibility that, without being needed, who am I? This is the hidden root. Not fear of being alone, but fear of being nothing when alone. It's a metaphysical fiera dread of the void, which is why most people never stop. Why they burn out, break down, or explode before ever daring to pull back. To stop being available feels like jumping off a cliff. But the truth is, you were already falling. You just hadn't realized it yet. Because every time you suppress your needs for the sake of others, you pay with your soul. And slowly, your smile becomes hollow. Your generosity becomes bitter. Your kindness becomes a cage. And no one, not even you, remembers who you really are. There's a slow kind of death that happens not from trauma, not from disaster, but from giving too much for too long. It doesn't come with a bang, it comes with a gradual quieting of your spirit. You don't notice it at first. After all, you're doing all the right things. You show up, you help, you say yes, you support, uplift, tolerate, people smile at you. They say, you're so strong, so dependable, you're everyone's favorite rock. But rocks don't bleed, and one day you realize you're not alive anymore. You're just functioning. That is the first unseen consequence, emotional self-erasure. When you make yourself perpetually available, you slowly begin to vanish from your own life, not physically, but psychologically, existentially. You stop asking what you want. You stop checking in with your needs. You forget how to rest. You forget how to say, I need. And when you do feel a needless solitude, distance it comes with guilt, shame, fear of being called selfish, lazy, cold. So you override your instincts again and again until your intuition no longer speaks. This is not just poetic tragedy. It is a neurological reality. Studies in neuroscience show that repeated self-suppression, especially of emotional needs, alters the brain's wiring. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for decision-making and identity, begins to defer to external validation as a compass for behavior. The amygdala, responsible for fear responses, becomes hypersensitive to rejection. Over time, your body interprets saying no as a threat to survival, which is why it feels so hard to disappoint others. It's not just politeness, it's programming. This is how you become trapped in what psychologists call the fawn response. Unlike fight, flight, or freeze, fawn is the survival mechanism that says, if I appease, if I please, if I serve, maybe I won't be hurt, maybe I'll be accepted. It is rooted in childhood when safety depended on the approval of those more powerful than you. And as an adult, that imprint never left. So every time you're tempted to say, actually, I can't make it, a small alarm goes off. Danger. You might be abandoned. And so you override. You give in. You show up again. But every survival mechanism has a price. And for the fawn, the price is chronic disconnection. You're surrounded by people, but you feel profoundly alone. You give love, but don't feel truly seen. You're constantly needed, but never nourished. And you start to ask, why do I feel more exhausted after being around people? Why does giving feel like a weight instead of a gift? Why do I silently resent the very people I care about? Because you're living in a one-sided contract tone you never signed, but silently agreed to. Here's the paradox. The more you give without limits, the less people respect your boundaries. Not because they're evil, but because you've taught them that you don't have any. People learn from your patterns. If you're always available, they assume you always will be. If you never say no, they forget it's an option for you. If you never ask for help, they believe you don't need any. So when you finally pull back, they react not to your truth, but to the shock of change. They say you've changed, that you're being distant, cold, different, but they never realized you were disappearing all along. They just didn't notice because it benefited them. That's the second unseen consequence, relational disillusionment. You begin to see who loved you for you and who loved you for what you provided. It's a devastating clarity. Some friendships fade. Some relationships crumble. Some soul connections go silent, and it hurts deeply because you believe the connection was real. And maybe it was until you stopped performing. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Some people love the version of you that betrays yourself. Not because they're malicious, but because it's easier for them. And when you stop betraying yourself, when you say, I can't be your emotional crutch anymore, or I need space, or I matter too, they face a truth they're not ready for. You were never meant to carry their entire world. That truth scares them. So they blame you, distance themselves, call you selfish. And suddenly, your world feels lonelier than ever. Which brings us to the third consequence, existential withdrawal. It's not depression, though it looks like it. It's not fatigue, though it feels like it. It's the emptiness that follows identity collapse. Because if you were always the helpful one, the listener, the doer, the good friend, then who are you when you stop? You wander in an emotional desert. You question everything. Did they ever love me? Who am I without their approval? Do I even like myself? What do I want? These aren't easy questions. They require grief for the version of you that everyone loved except you. And yet beneath that grief lies a seed. Small, silent, sacred. The seed of selfhood. It's been waiting. Not for applause. Not for validation. But for permission to rise. Rebellion doesn't always look like raised fists or public declarations. Sometimes rebellion is a whisper. A boundary drawn quietly. A single sacred no. A decision to rest. A refusal to explain yourself. After years of being a ghost in your own life, breaking free isn't dramaticist, deliberate, subtle, profound. The first act of rebellion is remembering. Remembering that you existed before the roles, before the helper, the therapist, the yes person, before you were defined by what you did for others. That version of you wild, curious, unapologetic never died. They were buried beneath expectation, beneath obligation, beneath fear. Your rebellion is their resurrection, and it begins with a single truth. You are allowed to exist outside of service. Let that settle. You don't need to earn rest. You don't need to justify solitude. You don't need to apologize for not being accessible 24/7. Carl Jung didn't just study the unconscious. He sought to integrate it, to become whole, not by cutting out the shadow, but by honoring it. Your no is not rejection, it's integration. It's saying, I matter too. I have limits, I have needs, and I refuse to betray them anymore. This is radical because society doesn't reward boundaries. It rewards sacrifice, compliance, availability. But history tells us every revolutionary was once called selfish. Socrates was condemned for corrupting the youth because he taught them to think for themselves. Galileo was imprisoned for looking at the stars and refusing to lie. Simone de Beauvoir was shamed for daring to say that women weren't born to serve. You're not Galileo, but your inner revolution matters just as much. When you stop answering every call, some people will label you cold. When you decline to attend yet another gathering, some will call you distant. When you stop fixing everyone's chaos, some will say you've changed. Let them, because something far more important is happening. You are returning to yourself. And this return isn't gentle. It's messy, unfamiliar, lonely at first. You'll have moments where you question it all. You'll be tempted to revert, to say yes just to feel needed again. But don't ever, because that need, that craving to be essential to others, it's not love. It's addiction. And like all addictions, it keeps you numb to your pain. But pain isn't the enemy. Pain is the map. Let it guide you to what you've ignored, to the versions of you that are still waiting, to the dreams you postponed, to the voice that was drowned out. Start small. Say no when you mean it. Rest without earning it. Take up space emotionally, physically, energetically. Write down what you want, not what others expect. And when the guilt comes, and it will come, don't resist it. Guilt is not proof of wrongdoing. It is proof of rewiring. Let guilt be the incense of transformation. Burning off the old rules, clearing space for truth. Reclaim your rituals. Wake up without checking your messages. Spend time alone without explaining why. Revisit your passions not for monetization, not for validation, but for joy. This isn't selfish. It's sanctuary. You are building a life that includes you, not just the version others benefit from. And yes, it will change your relationships. Some will fall away. Not because you failed, but because they were never built to hold the real you. Others will adjust. Some will even admire your courage. Because truth is magnetic. And your rebellion will inspire others. Silently, slowly, in ways you'll never see. The friend who sets a boundary because they watched you do it first. The coworker who dares to rest because you modeled it. The sibling who finally says, I can't be everything for everyone because your voice made it possible. This is how revolutions ripple. Not through noise, but through authenticity. You don't need to save the world. You just need to stop abandoning yourself in the process. Because when you stop being available and not out of bitterness, but out of truth, you reclaim your life. And that life, it's sacred. It's sovereign. It's yours. At the end of it all, after the silence, after the shedding, after the rebellion, something unexpected happens. You don't just find peace. You find yourself, not the version of you who is finally balanced, not the version who has perfect boundaries, not the empowered persona, but the one beneath all of that, the quiet soul, the child before the roles, the presence that existed before the performance. And you realize you were never meant to be available to everyone, because being available to everyone meant being absent from yourself. That was the real tragedy all along. You thought love was measured in presence, in service, in accessibility, but true love begins in sovereignty, in the unapologetic ownership of your own inner world. Carl Jung understood this deeply. He wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And who you truly are is not a role, not a function, not a support system, not a shoulder to cry on, not a yes machine. You are a soul, a flame, a sovereign landscape of joy, desire, rage, longing, solitude, wisdom, softness, strength. You are not what others need. You are what you choose to become." And here's the ultimate paradox. When you stop being available to everyone, you become more deeply available to life itself. Available to your truth, to your passions, to your grief, to your healing, to the present moment. And from that alignment, your relationships change not because you serve better, but because you love without agenda. You don't give to be needed. You give because you have something to share. You don't listen to gain approval. You listen because you're curious, awake, present. Your love stops being transactional. Your time becomes sacred. You no longer panic when someone is disappointed in you, because your worth is no longer tied to their comfort. You no longer feel guilty for resting, because rest is how you return to yourself. You no longer fear solitude, because in solitude you hear the voice that was always drowned out, your own. And that voice, it doesn't always say beautiful things. Sometimes it screams. Sometimes it cries. Sometimes it's angry. But it's true. And truth is the birthplace of power. This is the final realization. Your power was never in your availability. It was in your authenticity. When you operate from authenticity, you stop chasing peace, you become peace. You stop performing love, you embody it. You stop managing others' emotions and start tending to your own soul. You stop being a mirror for everyone else's wounds and become a window into what's possible when you finally come home to yourself. That's the shift, not a change in schedule, a change in ontology and how you exist in the world. You realize, I am not here to be consumed. I am not here to be convenient. I am not here to be pleasing. I am here to be whole. And that wholeness, it's messy. It's imperfect. It's unpredictable. But it's yours. And when you live from that place, you become untouchable, not because you don't feel, but because you no longer abandon yourself when you do. The world may not understand it. Some may still call you difficult. Others may miss the old version of you, the ever available one. But you won't. Because once you've tasted self-honor, once you've rested in your own presence, once you've seen that you are not the echo of others' expectations, you will never trade yourself for belonging again. This is what it means to be free. Not to be alone, but to be real. Not to be cold, But to be clear, not to be distant, but to be deeply rooted in a life that finally includes you. And in that clarity, you'll find a new kind of love. Love that doesn't demand your exhaustion. Love that holds space for your truth. Love that says, you don't have to disappear to be with me. That love begins with you. So tonight, as you sit with these words, ask not who you're disappointing. Ask not what roles you're shedding. Ask only this: am I finally becoming who I was before the world told me who to be? And if the answer is yes, then everything is changing, exactly as it should.